What I found in time, which is really interesting if you think about how labels work, is that the receiver gets to decide what it means when you're using it. For them, I get to decide what it means when I'm speaking it, but they get to decide what it means when they're hearing it.
Hello, and welcome to the Complex Couples Podcast. I'm Heidi. I'm a couples therapist and relationship coach specializing in mixed orientation marriages and mixed gender identity relationships. Whether you're just discovering this reality or you've been on this journey for a long time, this is the space where your marriage matters, your values matter, and your choices matter. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Complex Couples Podcast. I'm here today with Daniel, and I'm excited to talk to him today a bit more about labels. We've been talking about the impact of labels, some of the benefits of labels and some of the drawbacks of them, and some of the struggles when one person has a label that works for them and the other person it doesn't. And so the first thing I'd like to talk to you about, Daniel, or ask you about is, as we've discussed this, you kind of said you didn't really have a need for labels until you started talking about this out loud. And so I just would like to know more about that experience when you started needing labels, what it was like for you to determine what labels fit, and kind of that process.
I think it's super interesting. Even how you phrase a question tells us that labels have a place, but they're not necessarily needed as part of it, right? I think we use them because we use them to communicate to other people generally, right? That's not always the case. I think sometimes, and we'll talk about how that works, I think sometimes we take them on ourselves, but I think labels are usually used to communicate a lot of information efficiently to other people. And so, yeah, as I was thinking about it, because you asked me, well, how did you identify or think about your situation early on? And my thought was like, well, I definitely didn't take on a label, early on. I was very aware of my experience, but I didn't necessarily label it or call it anything. Just I didn't necessarily have a need for a label until I started talking about this experience that I was having more broadly.
And so prior to that, just being curious, prior to that, what was it like in your head?
I think early on, teenager years, even in my early 20s, it was just a confusing experience, right? And so I thought, well, I definitely knew guys were attractive. I look back and there were definitely, crushes and experiences like that I was having as a teenager, but I didn't really know what they were, or I wasn't really willing to even think about it in that way.
Do you think you would have even labeled as a crush back then?
No.
Right.
No, that's when I look back. I mean, it's clearly drawn and attracted, right, to other guys, but I didn't understand necessarily what was happening. And so I think that evolved in time, where I recognized more concretely, what was experiencing. But early on, I just would have assumed that I was interested in being like them, right? So
okay. And so that experience was, to some degree, it wasn't necessary to define to some degree is what you're saying. It wasn't necessarily
again, when it's an experience and something that's happening in your head, you don't have to necessarily put labels on it, right? You could use more words and just like a label, I always find it interesting. We can think so much faster than we can communicate or speak, right? And so when you're thinking, you can think of all the components of your experience, and then we throw a label on it to try to encapsulate all of those things that we're experiencing and thinking. But when you're thinking about it, I don't think you necessarily have to. You can.
Yeah. I think some people care a lot to do that, and some people it's not as important to. And I think I can see, knowing you, that would be something you'd just be willing to be like, oh, this is just what it is, and I don't need to define it.
Yeah.
Whereas someone else might really feel like a need to define exactly what this experience is. And so as you had to speak, or as you didn't have to speak about it, you started to speak about it, and you had to choose a label. What did you choose, and how did you determine what to choose?
I think the first time I ever talked about it, when I told my buddy, I just said that I was attracted to guys. And again, it was definitional, right? I wasn't going to attach a lot of other things to it. That's how I started talking about it. And I think at that point is really when my journey of trying to figure out what it was or what I was going to call it started. Because at that point I started talking about it more frequently, and thinking about it in a different way.
And so now I'm thinking of when you told me, and I think that was also what you used, is like, I'm attracted to men. And I remember, so you had talked to our couples therapist the week before you told me, just to kind of walk through and think through how my reaction might be, like how you could tell me. And she asked you a question as far as, and I'm just assuming because this is what I remember, okay? But she asked you a question of why do you refer to it as gay and not bisexual when you are married to a woman?
It's interesting. Again, a lot of times this has to do with what I'm trying to communicate and who I'm trying to communicate with, and the time that I have to communicate it. And so, yeah, when I did call her, I did use the term gay, and she was like, okay, well, what does that mean? Are you just attracted to men? And I'm like, well, generally, I mean, I would say that that's my primary attraction, but I'm also attracted to Heidi. And then that's when she's like, well, why don't you use the word bisexual? And, at that point in time, my thoughts were like, I would identify as bisexual if it felt balanced in my brain between men and women, and it didn't, and doesn't.
Okay. And so, but somehow that indicates that the term gay is what you use when you talk to her. Why did you choose that term, do you think, at the time?
Well, I think at first when I started using it, it communicates a lot quickly. And I had learned, and I started to learn over time, that it means different things to different people. But I think in general, it's the term that means that a man's attracted to a man. So I used it that way. Now, what I found in time, which is really interesting if you think about how labels work, is that the receiver or the audience gets to decide what it means when you're using it. For them, I get to decide what it means when I'm speaking it, but they get to decide what it means when they're hearing it. Right. And so when I speak to someone in more of our parents' generation, it means something dramatically different than it does when I speak to someone that's like in our children's generation. So in our parents' generation, I think it had a lot of negative connotations. In fact, it was probably more of a slur than it was an identity that anyone would choose themselves. I think that people in the LGBTQ community that we talk about today, they took that name and then embraced it, and then it became an acceptable term to use. But I don't think it was in the 70s and 80s. And so when we speak to someone that is older, they have a really negative reaction to it in some cases. And it means a whole lot to them. To them, it seems to me to mean a lot more about lifestyle, about what are people choosing to use. And they think a lot about, gay pride parades and guys running around without hardly any clothes on, and a really promiscuous lifestyle is what they, I think, associated with. So,
or sex with other men.
Yeah. I think
maybe
it's broader
not
than that generally, but for someone of that generation. And so again, I think the only importance here, because this could be right or wrong for different people listening based on, again, their experience, right? That's the thing. Language is imperfect, and labels are a bunch of words all smashed together in one word. And so they're imperfect and they mean different things to different people.
Right. I know when I'm working with clients, I really ask people to define so many words, right? Like they'll say a word and I'm like, well, what do you mean by that word? Because I know that it can mean something completely different to them than it does to me. And I want to find,
figure out what it is. And that's
what
so
it
important,
actually means.
Because you can make the wrong assumptions.
Absolutely.
I mean, an example that I use, and then I want to jump back actually and talk about something, kind of a little bit further back in time. But one of the examples I always use is I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or a Mormon. And when I say that to people, it means something to them. Now, oftentimes it's misinformed, right? If they're not around, the church a lot. But in general, it's pretty accurate. Like the Mormon church has a reputation for believing certain things and having good family values, and maybe hardworking individuals. Return missionaries are great salespeople. I mean, there's all these things that happen. And one of the things that everyone always assumes is that you're Mormon, that means you don't drink caffeine, right? And so there are all sorts of things that people believe around that term, and not all of them are true.
Right.
You know, I drink caffeine sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. And some people think that means that I must not be a Mormon, or at least a good one. But like, it just means different things to different people.
Right.
Well, where I wanted to go, if you're okay with me jumping back a little bit, I think when I did start talking about my personal experience more broadly, I did start using the word gay at that time. And so I would like to talk about that in a minute. But if you go back a little before that, I think there was a period of time after I had started talking about this with my close friend that I was starting to play with labels a little bit more and try to figure things out. And I remember reading an article online, and I can't even remember what it was about necessarily, but in this article, the author made a distinction between sexual orientation and sexual orientation identity. And honestly, as simple as that was, and maybe everyone that's listening understands it, that was like this groundbreaking moment for me. Because I had a hard time figuring out how I could talk about my experience and recognize that I had this natural, what I would describe now as sexual orientation that was real. And it wasn't something that I chose. It wasn't something that I decided if it was there or not. It just was. But then to all of a sudden give me the power to recognize that the way that I identify, that's where I had choice. Right? The sexual orientation, I didn't necessarily have choice, but how I identified. And then I think I took that a step forward to recognize that how I behaved and chose to do with that sexual orientation, that's what I chose to do. But I don't get to choose sexual orientation, but I do get to choose the other thing. And then I started attaching that to more of like the difference between identification and labels and words and what I would call like the physical, like human experience that I was having.
Okay. So I want to sum that up in my words and see if I'm following. Is that okay?
Sure.
So what I'm hearing you say is sexual orientation, it was kind of the draw. Like you had a draw to the same gender, and that was your sexual orientation.
That's
and
right.
that was something that could not be helped.
Yes.
And sexual orientation identity was more about the choices that you made in your life and who you chose to be.
That's
with
right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
Okay. And so
Yeah, and the biggest difference there is that I really, and you've heard me talk about it, and I'll continue to talk about it, is that I don't choose this experience that I'm having, but I get to choose what I do with it, right, every day.
Right.
And I think I view it very similar. Like, I don't choose to be a white male American. It is. Now I get to decide what that means,
and how you
and how
behave.
I interact with other people, right? I mean, I could be, someone who supports women or someone who doesn't, I could be someone who's a racist or someone that's not. And so I get to choose what I do with this experience in life, but I am a white male.
Okay.
And so that's the way I look at it in sexual orientation, is I have no choice in what that experience is. Right. But just like being a white male, I get to choose what I do with it.
Right.
Being attracted to men, I still get to choose what I do with that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. One of the things I'm thinking about is how when we kind of suppress certain parts of us, I don't know if you've noticed this, but like maybe we want to be, let me see if this is actually a perfect example, but so sometimes when we suppress or hide certain parts of us, like say this same-sex attraction part of you or gay part of you, however you want to identify it, and then we kind of allow it to take up space, it can kind of take over everything. Like it gets really big for a while, right?
It takes up all the space for a period of time.
Yeah.
And I think that's really natural. I think it's probably challenging to manage for people when they have, responsibilities and like families and jobs and things like that. But yeah, you're right. I think when you kind of unbottle that genie, if you will, like it like takes up like all the space.
Right. And so I can see where for a time being, and I don't think this is just about suppressing sexuality. I think this is suppressing any parts of our identity that kind of need to take their proper place, that need to be accepted by us as acceptable. But I can see where the label might feel like really front and center in the beginning when you've hid it for so long. Like, does that resonate with you at all?
That definitely aligns with my experience. I think that even when I started talking with my buddy about it, it was still somewhat contained, right? So I didn't feel that it took up too much space. I mean, I did allow it to take up more space, like in my mind, but I think when I told you and then we were willing to talk about it with more and more people, it then started to take up a lot more space. And then this thing that I hadn't really worried too much about in the past, all of a sudden seemed really important. And it was probably because a lot of people were asking me questions.
Right.
It's like, well, why do you use that word? And I had a lot of people ask me that.
Right.
And it's because when I first came out more broadly, the word that I chose to define my experience was gay.
Yes.
And that felt genuine. It felt real. It felt like acceptance to me. And as you mentioned, like, I do think it's super important that we accept these parts of us, whatever they may be. But in this case, my feelings of same-sex attraction, like, it was really important that I accept that. Right. And so in so doing, I started using the word gay, and to me that felt like I was accepting it. And
the closest to your experience, your lived experience.
It was
time.
And the way that I understood
the way
and would
you
have used the word.
Yes.
Right. And so that's the thing. Again, if people are the receiver, I can't control how they're receiving the word. But to me, it felt the most appropriate. In fact, there were other labels and things that people were using that felt almost repressive in some ways. Like, if they said that someone is experiencing same-sex attraction, or, even labeling it like SSA, to me that sounded like we were just trying to, like, clean up a problem, right? That we were trying to take a word that people were uncomfortable with and be like, oh, we're just going to minimize it, and then we're going to call it, this person is same-sex attracted.
Right. Even though for them that could feel like the most authentic label to their experience, right?
Could.
So it's you interpreting a label the way you interpret it.
Well, it's interesting if you think about the difference between a label and a definition. When someone says I experience same-sex attraction, that's actually more of a definitional like phrase than it is a label. And so then people started using it as their label.
Like I'm SSA or something.
Yeah, or like,
same-sex attracted or
like,
something.
we've gone to conferences and people are like the SSA men.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so we put a label on it and made it a label, but it actually is more definitional, I think. But still, to me at the time, it felt like we were trying to minimize or hide someone's experience, where gay just seemed to be more accepting. And it definitely was a word that was more broadly used and accepted. I mean, I do think that if someone...
Gay was?
Yeah. I think if broadly you spoke about someone who was SSA, people would be like... excuse me?
What are you
word are you talking about?
Right.
Right. And so that's one of the reasons why I was opposed to that. And I still actually don't necessarily use that word a whole lot, or that phrase.
Right. So that evolved over time. Like when I do remember using the term gay at first, and then something shifted for you. And I think it's important to speak to my experience a little bit here, because as a spouse, you had told our therapist you were attracted to men and Heidi. I think that settled me down a bit because I felt included. So I might not have been as worried about the terminology. I mean, I still was, but more from an outsiders looking in at us perspective than a you looking at me perspective. But,
and why was that? Why do you think that it was different from outsiders looking in and me speaking?
I think that I just had this perception that everyone else was if they heard that my spouse was gay, it would mean he wasn't attracted to me. He was only attracted to men, which I had that confirmed multiple times through questions people asked or whatever. And I was very concerned. I mean, I think there's something in us that, like, we really want to be meaningful to our spouse. And it's really important to feel that they're choosing us, right? And so for you, the word gay, what did that mean to you personally then? I think, for good or for bad, I think I accepted your definition. Like I had thought through it, and I had my own perception of what it meant. And it probably lined up more with what you had already determined. Essentially, it was attraction to men. I didn't really assume that that meant there was sex with other men. I wasn't associating it with a pride parade or like any of that. It was just more about attraction to the same gender.
I wonder, do you think any of that could have been, again, generationally things change? And I think we were on that change moment, right? Like the word gay when we were really young wasn't really a positive connotation, but then it shifted throughout our lives when we were still fairly young. And so do you think that that might have allowed you,
Yeah, I mean, I think so, but I also think like I had really grappled with this. And when I went back to grad school, one of the things I really grappled with is that I'm going to have to work with the LGBTQ community. I don't understand it really. I felt very naive about it. And so I had actually done quite a bit of grappling about like, okay, what does this mean? I'd also really wrestled with, can a gay man be in a heterosexual relationship? Those were all questions I had grappled with a lot. And I had come to the conclusion that, and I would say with God's help, I have to acknowledge that this was very much with God's help, I had come to the conclusion that it is possible. If someone really, really wants it and wants to make it work, it is possible. And so I felt like there was some inclusion already for me.
but you had
which might
spent a
have
fair
helped.
amount of time thinking about it, which
Yes.
is maybe unique in that situation. So you've talked to a lot of spouses that are in relationships like ours.
Right.
When you talk to people, what are the terms that their spouse use? What kind of impact does that have on them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really difficult one for a lot of people because when you use the term gay, and if I interpret that as meaning you are attracted to men and men only, as a spouse, I'm going to feel excluded from that. And if we're married, I think the assumption is I'm going to want to be included, right? And so that's important. I think there's another thing that's happened that I've seen, and that is that there's this assumption that if someone in our circles, I'm going to say there's an assumption in our circles, more religious circles, that if someone uses the term gay, that eventually they're going to act out on that. And so that's really scary as a spouse. If you think that using a label is going to lead to this certain outcome, no matter what, that's scary. And I remember initially feeling a little bit of that as we started talking to other people in these circles and worrying because that was the term you were using actually at the time. And so I was kind of like, oh no, do I need to worry? And I would say I just had a feeling of like this is his to figure out and his to define. And yes, it impacts me, but somehow I did feel capable of giving you some space for that. And it did change over time. And so, and actually, I don't know if I recollect this correctly, but it seems like one of the things that started to change was that when I would refer to you as gay or like your mom would refer to you as gay, that felt different to you. Is that accurate?
That is really interesting. I kind of forgot that. But yeah, I think it was a word I was super comfortable using, but I didn't like hearing it about me. And I don't know if that was really because I had tried to like stay away from that for so much of my life, or I didn't want to identify with it. And so I didn't like people saying it. But yeah, that's a really interesting thing. Like for me personally, it felt uncomfortable when other people used it for me. And in fact, today it still does. Like I
Really?
think I'm a little fine. I'm okay with it, but it still does. It still bothers me a little bit. I mean,
What feels uncomfortable about it?
well, today, like again, I'll use it still occasionally, right? I just find it incomplete. I think, I mean, I'd love to talk, let's talk a little bit through the journey there, but we're going to fast forward to the end and then we'll come back. Is I've actually reached a point in my thinking now where I reject almost all labels. I find labels limiting. I find them controlling. I feel that they take away my freedom and my choice. And therefore, I choose not to use almost any label. And so there's your conclusion. So let's jump back to the journey to get there. Because I think that I did start using the word. And I think that when people started calling me gay, like you said, I had a kind of a negative feeling and reaction to it. But I think during that same time, I was also just trying to figure out what these labels meant. And I was in a community now where I could talk about it, right? And so we were part of North Star. We started meeting a lot of friends that were in relationships like ours. And so we were talking a lot about it. And it was interesting. Everyone experiences it differently and thinks about it differently. And I started to try to figure out how I was supposed to fit in. What did it mean to be gay for me? What did it mean to be in a mixed orientation marriage? How was I supposed to behave in these things? And it started creating actually a fair amount of stress for me. Because there were some things that I didn't necessarily want to do. I mean, one of the things that was really interesting is I started hanging out with more people that, were attracted to men. And I love those friends. I really enjoy being with them. I have a lot of other friends that are heterosexual too, and I wanted to still be and spend time with them, right? And so that was one of the things I was torn with. I'm like, am I supposed to only hang out with these new friends now, or can I still hang out with my own friends? Like, how do I need to balance my time? And I also felt some pressure to spend a lot more time in the North Star organization, maybe thinking about how to help other people that experience, same-sex attraction or anything, in this sexual minority realm. And so I think I started feeling a lot of pressure to do different things, to participate in different organizations. And so that, along with, just trying to figure out like how labels worked, was just creating a lot of stress for me.
Was the stressful experience, do you think it was more just about figuring out your place and where this needed to...
I think it was figuring out place, how much time it should, like to your point, it takes a lot of space up in your brain, and trying to figure out how much time I wanted to dedicate to it.
Okay.
And I had made a choice already that I wasn't going to change the way I identified from like how I lived my life. Should we say, right? I was going to stay married to you. I love you. I love our relationship. I was going to keep it that way. I loved our kids and our family. And so I had no intentions of changing anything. And so all of a sudden I was feeling all this pressure to change things in my life or behave differently, spend my time more focused in this area. And quite frankly, I didn't really want to. I really liked the life that I had, and I felt that I had chosen it. And so I think that's what was kind of creating the stress. And then this was a space that I think you wanted to step more into.
Right.
And you wanted me to be with you.
Yes.
On it.
Yeah.
And I think...
I would say I added to that pressure.
Yeah, so that was a stress here.
Because I really was like, no, this is a group that... This is an area where help is needed. And I definitely added some pressure there.
Yeah.
So I can see. Yeah.
And I think we've come to a good spot now. I join you on your podcast here once out of 4 or something, and that's a good balance for me, right? Like I'm willing to step into this space occasionally, but it's not something that I want to occupy a lot of my time.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, get back to my conclusion that I reached here is that like there are a lot of things that I identify with, a lot of labels. And I remember actually, and I don't have it with me here, but I made a list of all my labels at this time. And it was really, really, really long. When I realized that there are a lot of labels that I put on myself, right? I mentioned, I member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I list that one there. I'm a father. I'm a husband, right? I'm a business executive. And then there are other things that I identify with. I love the environment, but I'm not perfect. So I call myself a part-time environmentalist, and so I have all these things that I label myself with. And I started thinking about it as like a play in life, and if you watch a movie or a play, there are some main characters that show up, but you don't watch just the same thing the whole time, right? I thought about it from Star Wars. I'm like, a whole episode of just Darth Vader would be pretty lame.
Right.
You kind of need all of the characters, and they all take center stage at different times. And those are all important moments, right? So all the characters are important, and we're glad that they step up at certain times to take the center stage. So I kind of think that every part of us needs a moment to shine. It needs a moment in the spotlight, and then it needs to take its place in the cast of this broader thing that is life. And so to me, that's when I started realizing, I'm like, oh, this is a really important part of me. My attraction to men, or the gay part of me, or whatever, however you want to call it, had a really important piece. And at moments, it got to take center stage. But there was a time in my life there during that time period that it had been on the stage for way too long, right? It had been taking up way too much space for me. And I was like, hey, this is not how I want my play to be.
Yeah.
And that's when, I was talking to my therapist, I think, about it and telling him some of the stress. And that's when he made the life-altering comment to me that seems so simple, is like, I just want Daniel to be cool with being Daniel. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, that was like this major turning point. All of a sudden, all that stress and all that difficulty I had just went away. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, this play gets to be whatever I want it to be.
I get to be Daniel, right? Which is
get to
very
be me.
broad label, right?
That's
I get to choose.
So
Yeah.
So that's when I was able to step away from choosing a label, and then I start to use it more in definitional terms. And so that's when I kind of fell back to the fact that I say I am attracted to men, because that...
And Heidi.
And Heidi, right? Yes, of course.
Going for the spouses who want inclusion, right?
And I recently had an experience where I told a friend about my experience, and I said, I'm gay. Mm-hmm. And then we talked about it for like 30 minutes, or maybe an hour or more. And then like a couple weeks later, he kind of reflected the meeting back to me, and he's like, yeah, you started and you said you were gay. And then as we had this conversation, it was like you just kept peeling back the layers. Mm. And all of a sudden it became so much more nuanced than just that label would indicate. Mm-hmm. It is. And I think that's where the experience of, well, I'm really happily married and I love my wife and I'm attracted to her, and we have a great relationship, mm-hmm. a great sexual relationship and all those things. Mm-hmm. And like, so you pull that back, and then you start asking other questions, but like, how do you what other things are attached to it? And like, there are things that are stereotypical gay that I love and embrace, right? Like I love decorating, right? I love like making beautiful things, and I love cooking and all these things that I, for very many years, have argued have nothing to do with being gay with you and other people. And I still I say that at some time, I don't know, but like there are things that are all attached to it. So anyways, so as I spoke to him, like the layers keep coming back or kind of getting peeled off. And then all of a sudden, what does he see in the end?
You.
He sees Daniel.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that's really why I'm a huge proponent of finding out who we want to be, mm-hmm. and defining that and letting that be us.
Right.
Instead of a label.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, I really love that idea of, and I think of how badly each of us wants to be seen. It's so important to be seen. And I think what a gift you give people when you are willing to peel back the layers with them, mm-hmm. and share it with them, but also what a gift they give you when they're asking questions, when they're...
That's very true.
Invested in understanding what this means to you. And I think that can be really difficult in a marriage where someone else's view differing from yours might feel threatening, right? And and it doesn't have to be. We're meant to be different. Mm-hmm. And I think also when we start peeling back the layers, we can actually find our similarities. Like, I think you want me to be included too, mm-hmm. as much as I do, mm-hmm. right?
Absolutely. Well, I think when you said that, if I can jump to like some recommendations here, I really think that curiosity is always going to be helpful, mm-hmm. in any situations. Like, although it's really hard sometimes when you feel threatened, and I think it's really hard when you feel potentially lost or mm-hmm. excluded to be curious. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to be curious for a really long time. Right. Like, I think if you have a spouse that's like working through some things, like it might be easy to be curious for like a day or two, but it's really hard to be curious for months and years.
Is that going back to our conversation of like all the questions that I had to ask?
That is true too, like, probably. Yeah, it can get kind of exhausting, right? But I think being curious and accepting that curiosity is really important. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason that I think curiosity is so important is because it lacks judgment.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And I think that's really important in this realm. And I think patience is really important. Like, you know, we talked about the timeline here. Everything that we just talked about in 30 minutes happened over from beginning to today, like a 10 or 12 year experience. Right. And so it's easy to make it sound simple when we're having this conversation, I mean, my message could be just go be you.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, but like, I didn't just get to this point overnight,
Well,
and it's still probably not done,
And I don't think that's,
right?
if I'm understanding you correctly, I'm not sure that's exactly what you're saying. I think you're saying choose who you want to be. Like,
Absolutely.
go be you is,
I would,
there's something about accepting the parts of you that are there.
Yep.
And there's something about, and choose who you want to be. Because something you said a little bit earlier about, and I'm attracted to my wife. Like, my brain was like, not always. Like, sometimes I behave really unattractively. I can complain, I can nag, I can blame, I can do some really unattractive behaviors. And so I think to say that as a broad statement wouldn't be fully accurate. You're attracted to me
Well, I think that
when I'm like behaving attractively.
I think, you're just teasing another episode that we haven't done yet, because I think that like we should talk about what attraction is,
Right.
and spend a lot more time there
Right.
in the future.
And so to that point, I'm just saying I have to choose who I'm going to be as well. And sometimes that's attractive, sometimes it's not, because we're human and we don't always, behave as the person we want to be. But I think to your point, when we take a label and we decide this is what I have to be if I adhere this label, that's where it's limiting, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah, I think so. I think labels can be incredibly limiting, and we get to decide who we are.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate the conversation and hope that it was useful. If you have questions or comments, feel free to email me, Heidi@complexcouplescoaching.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and you can find more information at my website, complexcouplescoaching.com. And have a great week.